Hey guys, Jelby Zombie here, and happy Halloween! Yes, speaking of Halloween, did you guys see the Halloween Kills teaser trailer? It was ace! But that's not what this video is about. This video, I'm continuing my review of the classic Universal monster movies, and this time, it's Frankenstein. After Todd Browning's Dracula was released in 1931, it wasn't long before a new monster would appear on cinema screens and terrify cinema goers. In fact, 7 months later came Frankenstein. The movie was directed by James Whale. Whale was an English film director, theatre director, and also actor who spent the majority of his career in Hollywood. He would later go on to direct more classic horror movies for Universal, such as The Old Dark House from 1932, The Invisible Man, released 1933, and The Bride of Frankenstein, released 1935. But for Frankenstein, there needed to be a new actor to portray Universal's new monster. After portraying Dracula in Todd Browning's 1931 movie, Bela Lugosi was approached to play the monster in James Whale's adaptation of Mary Shelley's novel. But Lugosi turned down the role because it was a non-speaking role and he would have to be under heavy prosthetics. The actor who would then go on to play the monster would be Boris Karloff. In fact, in the opening titles, Karloff is left with a question mark at the end of his character's name. After Frankenstein was released, Boris Karloff portrayed the monster 2 more times for Universal. Those 2 movies would include Bride of Frankenstein from 1935 and Son of Frankenstein from 1939. Strangely enough, in 1943, Bela Lugosi eventually played the monster in Universal's Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman alongside Lon Chaney Jr. Lon Chaney Jr. would also portray the monster in the 1942 movie The Ghost of Frankenstein. So, wait, that's Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff, and Lon Chaney Jr. 3 classic Universal monster actors. But out of all the actors that have portrayed the Frankenstein monster, Boris Karloff's portrayal will always be the most iconic. Hell, you could even say that Boris Karloff's Frankenstein's monster is the most famous movie monster of all time. The amazing makeup that we all identify the monster with was created by makeup effects artist Jack Pierce. Jack Pierce would also go on to create other monster movie makeup for Universal. From the point that Karloff appeared on screen in 1931, the monster since then has been embedded into our pop culture, and still to this day, there is so much confusion between the creator and the monster. The creator is Frankenstein, and the monster is, well, just that, the monster. In James Whale's 1931 movie, Colin Clive plays the creator, Henry Frankenstein, but in Mary Shelley's novel, the character's name is Victor Frankenstein, and the reason why the names were swapped around was because the name Victor at the time was deemed too unfriendly to American audiences. Bit silly really, isn't it? Colin Clive in this movie is just so amazing. The scene where he's bringing life to his creation is just so amazing. He's screaming, "It's alive," from the top of his voice. Clive's portrayal in this movie is just so compelling. In fact, my 2 favourite portrayals of Frankenstein are Colin Clive and Peter Cushing. Other actors to notice are 2 who came straight from Dracula, Edward Van Sloan and Dwight Frye. Dwight Frye plays Frankenstein's hunchback assistant Fritz. Fritz helped Dr. Frankenstein to acquire the bodies that were needed for his experiments. He was also responsible for getting the abnormal brain that went into the monster. And without a doubt, one of my favourite scenes that features Fritz is definitely a random one, that's for sure. He's walking up the set of stairs of Frankenstein's castle, and for no reason at all, he just stops to pull up his sock. Why? I have no idea. Don't ask. I don't know. I don't know. But it's just one of those scenes that just makes me chuckle every time I see it. And of course, much like other Universal monster movie actors, Dwight Frye would appear in many more Universal monster movies. Edward Van Sloan in this movie plays Dr. Waldman, and he even plays the character just a tad same as Professor Van Helsing from Todd Browning's Dracula. And my favourite scene that features Mr. Edward Van Sloan is when he breaks the 4th wall at the start of the movie. He comes out from behind a curtain and addresses to the audience that the film that they're about to see might be a little too shocking for them. Many years later, that scene, and let's face it, the film itself, was parodied in The Simpsons Trios of Horror. Like I mentioned previously, there is no escape in this film. It is so embedded into our pop culture. Other than the creation scene, I would say the other most memorable scene in the film is when the monster stumbles across a little girl named Maria, playing by a lake with her kitten. Now, because this is an adaptation of a novel, there are to be changes. In the film, the confused monster throws Maria into the lake thinking she'll float like the flowers. In Mary Shelley's novel, the monster actually saves the little girl from drowning. Now, I just briefly want to talk about the censorship that affected certain scenes of this movie. It didn't make a huge difference, but of course I am glad now that the film is fully uncut. So the scene where the monster throws little Maria into the lake, that was censored. The scene would then cut just as the monster reaches out to Maria. Another scene that suffered the same fate was the creation scene. The scene itself wasn't affected, but the dialogue from Henry was. Just as Frankenstein yells, "It's alive!" the scene would then cut, leaving out the line, "In the name of God, now I know what it feels like to be God." Now, of course, this line of dialogue was taken out of the film at the time because that line was deemed as blasphemous. But in my honest opinion, it doesn't matter if you watch the movie with those scenes cut from the film or without, because the film still to this day holds up as being an absolute iconic and important part of cinema history. It's an important movie in general, it's an important horror movie. And the film gave us the most iconic and recognisable movie monster ever in motion picture history. And some folks out there might even say that they think that Bela Lugosi's portrayal of Dracula is more iconic than Boris Karloff's portrayal as the monster. But if you think about it, that's not strictly true. If you ever look at any promotional logos for the Universal Studios home of the classic monsters, who's up front? It's the monster. Dracula is always lurking behind. So I guess you could say from that point of view that Boris Karloff's portrayal as the monster sort of became the poster boy for Universal monsters. So guys, that was my review on Frankenstein from 1931, directed by James Whale. Really hope you guys enjoyed this review. And if you're keeping track, the next review from these series of reviews will be The Mummy. That's going to be an interesting review. I hope you guys can join me next time, and until then, take care.